You tell people that you're chill. You don't get rattled. You say, I'm fine when people ask you how you're doing. But what if your fine is not peace? It's shutdown. If it's emotional shutdown, it's not strength, it's numbness. And the cost is everything. Your relationships, your joy, even your purpose. I'm Marc Azoulay. In the next 12 minutes, I'll show you how to tell real peace from emotional flatline. And 3 things just to restart feeling again, starting right now. So let's be clear. Peace is not numbness. They are very, very different things. You might be thinking that you're peaceful, but really, you might be numb. So what does peace look like? Peace it's a sense of presence, right? I think that is the key difference here, is that when you're peaceful, you're present, you're living in harmony, you're aware of what's around you, and most importantly, you're aware of the feelings that you're having. Emotional numbness is a state of flatline. It's a state of depression. It's a state of tightness, right? Where peace is a more open, expansive type of feeling, right? You can kind of take whatever comes. Numbness is a tight, closed off, often resentful or fearful mind state. So the way that we do it here is that we're going to go through kind of what this means, where it comes from, and then by the end, we're going to be giving you some practical shifts on how to make it better. So let's start here, right? I'm talking a little bit about your nervous system. If you've been listening to the show, you're familiar with that, right? But when your nervous system is regulated, then you're in a state of true calm. When you are in that harmonious, level-headed, even flow state system, then you're going to be feeling regulated, calm, and clear. But when you're numb, you're actually dissociated. You're detached from the present moment. And often your nervous system is kind of jacked out of control. You're either hyper stimulated, right? You're overstimulated, where you're just in a state of anxiety, panic, just kind of trying to distract yourself as much as possible. Or you're hypo stimulated, right? You're understimulated, where you can feel lethargic, fatigued, brain fog, even lazy. So where does this come from? A lot of men are very numb. We have this cultural conditioning where we're told to man up, we're told not to feel, we're told to just put everything in a box and move forward. And while there is value in that, there's value in being able to compartmentalize, especially before a big task or to kind of push through something. Biologically, we are designed to do that. When you're hunting a deer, there's no time for emotions. You have to bottle it up, move forward, make shit happen. But because in the modern world, that becomes a sense of strength, not a coping mechanism, we're in that state all the time. And if we're constantly bottling up and dissociating from our emotions, then we're never going to learn how to feel them. It's going to be something where we're quite behind where it comes to that. And that's pretty devastating for a lot of guys, because when something does overcome your emotions, whether that be rage or grief, or kind of the 2 main ones, it can look really ugly. Because yeah, you can block out 95% of your feelings, but there's going to be something. There's going to be something that's going to get there, and it's going to hit you pretty hard. Another thing that could cause this is trauma. So when you're in a traumatic incident, call that, a car accident or child abuse, or even a long-term state, maybe you lived in a very unsafe household where there were drugs and alcohol, or there was a lot of demeaning behavior, maybe you were bullied in school, you can be stuck in a fight or flight or freeze state. You can be stuck in this kind of adrenal, hyper arousal of your nervous system. And it's really tricky, right? Because even though you're over aroused, you could be frozen. And that's kind of what we're talking about here, is that you could have a lot going on internally, but you actually feel frozen and numb. The last thing, and this is a little bit harder to get a handle on, but it actually is the most common, funnily enough, is that this numbness could have been a survival strategy that you have learned over the course of your life, usually starting in childhood, that you can avoid pain by shutting down. You can completely avoid what you're doing, avoid feeling stupid, avoid feeling afraid, avoid feeling rejected, whatever that is, by shutting down, by pushing things away. And on the surface, though, this can look like procrastination. I think it can be a little more insidious and look like self-sabotage for a lot of guys. But the idea here is that you've trained yourself over trial and error, and often with a lack of instruction, right? If our parents weren't there to teach us how to, deal with our emotions, we often default to this idea of just blocking out and pushing away pain. So, when someone comes to me for therapy, I'm kind of looking at, okay, do they have some of these clinical signs? Do they have flat affect? Do they talk in monotone? They don't emote much. They don't smile. They don't grimace. They don't do anything. They're just kind of one data stream. Do they have low reactivity? And I'm not saying, not in a good way, right? Like, or is it hard to move them on things that would move a typical person? If they talk about losing a family member or losing a job or being sick or ill, things that would upset a normal person, are they reacting to that, or are they just kind of staying in that flat affect? Do they have a lack of joy? Do they report that nothing really makes them happy anymore, that they can't feel feelings, that they don't feel like they're engaged with their life? Are they living on autopilot? This idea, which I think a lot of men do, right? We talk about nice guys a lot. We'll get to them a little bit later, but a lot of these guys, you're just kind of like, get up, do your routine, go to work, come home, watch TV, do it again, again, again. That's autopilot living. There's not a lot of feeling there. It's a very narrow band of existence. And the last one is if they have difficulty naming feelings. If you ask them, hey, how you doing? How's your day? What's been going on for you? If they're like, I'm fine, no problem. It is what it is. But a lot of these terms can indicate a sense of numbness. So oftentimes when we look at these things, it can start on the surface. For instance, I had a client that came in that was talking about lack of sex and intimacy in his relationship. And as we start to dug a little bit deeper, it seemed that it wasn't just a lack of feeling in his relationship, it was a lack of feeling everywhere. Not only was he not enjoying sex with his partner, he wasn't enjoying his workouts, he wasn't enjoying his hobbies, he had pretty much isolated from most of his friends. He was pretty numb across the board. He was expecting that sex would be the one thing that could, maybe punch through that numbness, but the numbness was pervasive. It had nothing to do with his partner, even though he would often blame her for it. It was something that ran much deeper. And as we keep digging and digging and digging and asking some questions like, hey, when's the last time you felt something? So last time he felt something was 5 years ago from when we started talking, when his father was diagnosed from cancer. He remembers the moment very vividly where he got the news and he said he just kind of blacked out for a moment. He had the kind of like ear ringing noise and he stopped feeling at that moment. His nervous system got overwhelmed and he clamped it down. Unfortunately for this client, his parent did end up dying a couple years later, and he said he was numb by that point. He had already kind of internally cut them off. So the brain is kind of stupid, right? Like it's clumsy. If you try to shut down one thing, and in the case of this client, he was trying to shut down the pain of losing his father and then the subsequent grief, it actually shuts down everything. And you end up in this numb stance. And, family and friends, his wife in particular, they saw this as a problem, not as strength. I think as men we're told that, if you don't care about stuff, you're strong. But his wife saw it as absence. She saw it as disconnection from their relationship. And she saw it as a real problem, which ended up, threatening divorce and him ending up in therapy. So why do men think that numbness is attractive? Well, if you look at a lot of this male literature and you look at what heroes are, right? Kind of, John Wayne being kind of the archetypal one here. It's the idea that you're so strong, nothing can touch you, nothing can bother you. A way that a lot of men kind of deal with difficult things is by either saying it is what it is, which is this kind of false acceptance, right? Or saying, hey, I don't care about that. And in those micro moments, even though you think that you're powering through, you are pushing it away. You are actually distancing yourself from the present moment. You're disconnecting yourself from what's real, from reality, from truth. And you do that over and over and over again. One, it becomes automatic, right? Which is a huge problem that a lot of men suffer from. And two, you end up disconnecting from everything in your life. So I don't care might work with some workplace drama, right? Because you don't care. But when you stop caring about your wife or your kids, right? When they're upset, over time, it's going to be really disconnecting from them. So, often guys that are in this numb state, just like any kind of addictive pattern, they start to escalate things that make them feel anything. So for some guys, it often starts innocuously. Maybe it's actually something good like exercise or even work. And then it starts to turn to something like screens, and then it escalates to something like porn or alcohol or drugs. Because you want to feel things, right? Like you're a human creature, you're alive, and the mind is going to seek out things that make it feel. Unfortunately, a lot of those things are really bad for you. So the idea isn't to try to seek out more and more intensity. It's to actually reduce your walls so then you can be more open to the smaller things. So how do you do that? The first thing is mindfulness, right? Talk about that a lot on the show. I kind of trained Buddhism really hard for about 5 years of my life. So one thing is when you notice a feeling, take a moment, pause, breathe, and say it out loud. Say, hey, right now I feel blank. I feel angry. I feel upset. I feel bored. I feel numb. I feel happy. Taking a moment just to kind of figure out what your pathway is, trying to develop a map for your inner space so you can start to understand what emotions feel like. And in that moment, you'll notice just by naming the emotion and actually coming into contact with it, you'll know what to do. Right? There's kind of an intuitive thing that happens where you will know what to do with that emotion. Instead of numbing, disconnecting, or distracting, you can actually attend to that emotion in an intelligent way. What you can also do is if you're feeling really numb, is do a somatic micro reset, right? This is from DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. Essentially, it's something that shocks the system. So that can look like splashing your face with cold water. It can look like some high intensity breathing. It can look like exercise circuit. Anything that kind of spikes your nervous system, gets you out of that hypo aroused state and back to a baseline. You do that, and then go back to step one, do that mindfulness activity, and then see if there's anything alive there. And then if you want to make it real, if you want to actually change your life, start taking some real emotional risks. The first risk could be telling people in your life, maybe your partner, maybe your children, maybe your parents, I don't know, telling someone fairly close to you, I've been feeling numb. Just being honest with where you're at. Asking them for help, saying, hey, when you notice me disconnecting, can you just raise your hand or do a keyword, code word or something? But if you can start to make this a social thing, and men's groups, by the way, are really, really good for this. If you can start to make this a social thing, you can actually get that feedback loop that can help you. And then these people can set boundaries, right? They can help you know when you're starting to go back into autopilot, when you're doing, distraction behaviors like binging, or when you're avoiding connecting with other people, avoiding taking more risks. If you can have accountability partners, you can really, really help yourself push yourself out of these really stuck patterns. And then, one thing I would challenge you if you're inspired by this is figure out 3 micro rituals, right? Like you can do this emotion naming, maybe you can attach it to an alarm, or maybe when you go or leave work, you can try to do some of these body resets, right? They're great to do when you're leaving the house, when you're getting ready to start your day, or if you're taking a break, coming back from lunch or something. And then set up a weekly check-in with your friend. Find a way that you can chat with people. At Men's Therapy Online, we have a free Slack channel that you can join where you can just message me, right, directly, and do a check-in right there. I'm always kind of putting introspection questions and things that will help you think and shake yourself out of that numb place. So as we're going through this, I just really want to reiterate that calm is not a win. Feeling is, right? The goal is not to be flat. The goal is not to be a robot. The goal is to be a living, breathing, feeling human and to be a master of those emotions. I think that's the masculine twist, right? We're not just going to be completely surrendered to our emotions and be hysterical and be all messed up and, be crying on the couch. No, it's to know what those emotions are, to connect with them, use them as information, and act effectively in your life. That's what we're going towards. We're not going towards not feeling. We're going towards mastering. So as we're wrapping up here, try these things. Try it for a week and comment what changed. And then share with a friend, right? Share this video with a friend who's always fine. They need to wake up.